Okay, science time. Today we are talking about natural selection. Do you remember about natural selection? Have you talked about natural selection in previous classes, like when you were in elementary school or maybe last year? Or no, you've never heard this phrase before until now? Oh, so the bell work was define and provide examples of natural selection, so that's a good place to start. Would someone like to give us their definition and some examples of natural selection for the good of the YouTube video? A volunteer is what I'm looking for. Did you say your own name? Oh. Did you say her name? Tommy, let's hear yours. Do you want me to bring the microphone over to you so that you can say it into the mic? Here you go.
No.
Say it. Say it. Say it. Okay, I'll say it for you. Natural selection is when the environment determines which traits are beneficial and which are not. That's very good, Tommy. Let's all give Tommy a round of applause. Thank you for the nice, gentle round of applause. Does anyone else, now that we know that Tommy's is good, does anyone else want to provide their definition? Because you probably had something similar. Don't leave Tommy hanging. Come on, someone can do it. Someone be brave. Josie, let's hear yours.
They will either die because of disease or predators. They relate to evolution, genetic changes in traits, and pattern change in life.
Good. Good. Thank you. Let's all give Josie a round of applause, please. So natural selection is where the environment, I'm going to put that in quotes. It's not because it's not a real thing. Sometimes we put things in quotes because they're not real and we want to say what society says, but we don't really believe that that's the way it should be called. Like, for instance, if you don't agree with the term brunch, you think that's a stupid thing to say, you might put brunch in quotes when you talk about it because you want people to know what you're talking about, but you want them to know that you don't approve of it. That's not how I'm using this. We're going to talk about why I put it in quotes in a second, but the environment, I'm going to put also in quotes, selects which traits are passed on to offspring. I'm going to also include over time. This definition is based on your definitions, and I added over time to the end. Why, if you had to guess, why is the environment in quotes? We are tempted, because you've kind of been taught this way, but we're tempted to think the environment is like a separate thing. Like we almost define it as the thing around an organism that isn't that organism. But the environment is just as much a part of you as you are of it. Let me say that again. The environment, your environment, the 8th grade science classroom, Crawford High School, your front yard, you are just as much a part of that as it is of you. You wouldn't be the person you are without the environment. And the environment wouldn't be the environment that it is without you. It's all one of the same thing. Okay, so first of all, the environment is in quotes because it acts and is acted on by organisms. Acts and is acted on by organisms, which also, at least partially, make it up. I don't mean they factitiously assemble it in their brains. I mean they comprise it. The environment is made of, at least partially, is made of organisms. What's in your environment right now? Let's just list some things. This should be a really easy question. What's in your environment? People is in your environment. Are those living things? Yeah. Do they impact the way you are? Yeah. What else is in your environment? Tables. Are those living things? No. But do they impact the way you are? Yeah, they do. There's little poinsettia over there. It's pretty super dead, but it's part of your environment. And an egregious example of this is that if you ate that poinsettia, which is poisonous, you would, if not die, you would be very sick. And would that affect the way you are? Yes, that would definitely affect it. In exactly the same way, if you are in the middle of that overpass over there, you're right in the middle of it, an 18-wheeler comes and squishes you, the environment has affected you, has it not? And just like that, even when you get a paper cut or something very minor happens to you because of the environment, that has affected you. And then this selects, I put in quote, because it is not like, and you can have different theological or philosophical beliefs about this, but the observable evidence is that it's not a conscious or concentrated, directed effort in selection. It's not like the environment, Mother Nature, we could say. It's not like Mother Nature points her finger at this fox with only 3 legs and says, "You must die," and then kills it. That is not how the environment selects. Is it possible for a 3-legged fox to live and reproduce? Yeah, of course it is. That can happen. Is it more likely that it will die and not reproduce? Probably more likely. But when we say selects, we don't mean a conscious, not a conscious, oops, yeah, that was right. Conscious, I just lost my mind. How do you spell conscious? Not a conscious effort. Conscious directed effort. Conscious. Maybe like that? That's not the point. Conscious. Is that right? Anyway, what is that? Whatever. Not a conscious directed effort. And like I said, you can have different theological or philosophical. To you, maybe this is reality. I'm not willing to say it's not. But maybe God above does say, this fox will die, this fox will live. I'm not saying that's not true, but the evidence suggests that it doesn't, that the environment itself is capable of doing that without conscious effort. That the fact that maybe that 3-legged fox can't run as fast means that it is more easily eaten by a bear. Do you see? It doesn't have to be conscious. The bear doesn't have to be conscious for that to work. Maybe the 3-legged fox is less capable of going down a slope, and so it falls, and it breaks its little precious fox neck and dies. And that doesn't need consciousness for that to work. So the environment, which the fox is a part of, and which is part of the fox, selects, that is, can be better or worse for its environment can be better or worse for it, which traits are passed on. This is a very important part too. What process does this imply?
That's like
Reproduction. There are some really, really interesting parts of evolutionary biology as to why things age. You're aware of or surely not directly, but you are aware that there is a process in a woman's life called menopause, after which she's not able to bear offspring anymore. You're aware of this? So the evolutionary thought is then what is, from the standpoint of the environment or from the standpoint of the species, what is the benefit of a woman after she can't give birth anymore? This happens to men too. But after she can't bear offspring, what is her benefit to the environment? There's a lot of different ideas of why that is. Can you think of one? What might be beneficial of something even after they can't reproduce anymore in our species? Yeah, she can still protect her children, and she can protect her children's children. In fact, this is called the grandparent hypothesis, where having a community, even if they can't reproduce, is beneficial to the species. So there are benefits of being alive after reproduction has occurred, and those are included in the traits that make that entire species good for its environment and the environment good for the species. And that's kind of the other point of this, is that it's not about the individual. It's not only about the individual. In fact, it's primarily not about the individual. We had talked about a 3-legged fox that can't run as fast, but is it just as possible that a 4-legged fox, we could say, a perfectly, beautifully made paragon of foxhood, the fox than which there is no foxier, the best fox that has ever lived, is it possible for that thing still to slip and fall down a mountain and die? Yeah, so this is not perfect in either direction. Not everything that isn't suited for its environment dies, and not everything that is suited for its environment survives. It's not perfect. But over time, the higher likelihood of what we call, in quotes, fit individuals reproducing is higher. What do I mean by fit? Do I mean fit in the way that Cody, the coolest 8th grader, is fit and he's got the big biceps and the yoked traps and everything? Is that what I mean by fit? I thought you'd think that was funny. You guys are just, you're embarrassed that I'm talking about Cody like that. Do I mean muscular and skinny and can run 300 miles fit? No, what do I mean by fit here? Yeah. Put another way. When I say that your clothes fit, do I mean that they are yoked? No. I mean that they are well suited for you. They are the size that is appropriate for you. If I was going to use onesie as an example, but no, we're not all, but we are more or less adult human beings who are roughly the same size. But let's use this example instead. If I take my sweater off and put it on my 2-year-old son, does that fit him? Is that well suited for him? No. And in the same way, over time, 3-legged foxes are not well suited for their environment. Maybe the one 3-legged fox survives and passes on. And we're assuming here that 3-legged is a genetic modification, that it can pass on that gene to its kids. Kits. That's what a baby fox is called. But usually it's not. Because we had already talked about, when we talked about evolution, we talked about that some traits are pass-onable and some are not. Remember? Like if Garrett, when and if he has babies, will they have dislocated elbows when they're born because he has a dislocated elbow right now? No, even if he produced progeny right now, even if he made it so a child was going to be born in 9 months right now, would that child be born with a dislocated elbow because he has a dislocated elbow now? No, of course not. And a fox that loses its 4th leg in an accident will not pass on its 3-leggedness to its offspring. But we're going to assume that it was born with 3 legs, like a calf can be born with 2 heads. There was some genetic abnormality that made it born with 3 legs. Is it possible for a fox that is born with, that has a genetic abnormality that makes it have 3 legs, is it possible that it survives in its environment? Yeah, is it possible that it even reproduces? Is it possible that its reproduction reproduces? Yeah, but over time, since that is less fit, since it's less well suited for its environment, that trait will probably fade away. Here's another misconception about evolution that we have to address. I'm asking this in a way that is making it so you already know the answer, but is there a goal in mind? Are all critters kind of converging to be better and better? No, not really. It's very common for us because we think of ourselves as the highest order of beings on the planet, right? We think like, well, I can think, which a fox can't think, and a dog can't think, and a cricket can't think. We think that we're better than all these other species. But they're just as much, and when I say they're, I mean cricket, fox, dog, everything else, every other organism is just as much a product of 2 billion years of evolutionary past as we are. They're just as advanced, so to speak, as we are. They've survived geologic time and passed on their reproductive lineage just that long, just like we have. There's no better or worse about organisms. It's tempting for us because we think of ourselves as very intelligent, and that intelligence is the most best trait. But you can't fly. So a bird might think that flying is the best trait. You see what I mean? This is kind of getting into philosophy. But we're not the best organism just because we're the smartest. Everything that exists today is the product of just that long of evolutionary lineage. Everything that is living today has been evolving for all of geologic time, all of history. So it's really tempting to think that as evolution progresses, things will get smarter and better and generally more human-like, but that's not necessarily the case. In fact, it isn't the case. And what drives the whole thing? Natural selection is the mechanism. This is how traits are determined. I don't even really like that word. Traits are either useful in their environment or they're not, is through natural selection. But what drives all of this? It's all driven by what kind of change? Driven by what change makes this possible? Change in the environment. Yes, but I'm thinking specifically here of things, and those are both true because of this other kind of change, driven by genetic change. And how do genes change? 2 main ways that we already talked about. This is a review. Mutation and let's call it recombination. I'm talking about, you're right, adaptation can be a result of genetic change, but the actual process by which that happens is recombination. What's another name for recombination? Genetic recombination is reproduction, sexual reproduction. Because, just like we talked about yesterday, you aren't the same as either of your parents. Are you similar to both of your parents? Yes. But are you the same as either of them? No. Because they have genetically recombined, and you are the result. And are you fit for your environment? Well, you're still alive, aren't you? I mean, that's it. That's how you tell. Are you the most fit for your environment? And that's still to be decided. And it gets kind of wonky when we think about human beings who do have conscious thought, who have agency, because you can decide, not only, because this consciousness right here is an important part of this, because you can decide, without getting too involved or gross about it, you can decide who you're going to marry and reproduce with. Can't you? Will you always decide the most fit person? Maybe not. I don't know. You see what I'm getting at, though? That since we have a conscious deliberation in it, there is some idea, not necessarily true, but there's some idea that human evolution is either at a standstill or could even regress, although that's a moral judgment, because human beings can decide with whom they mate. We're not entirely products of our environment. So unlike the dragonfly that won't mate with another dragonfly that has all its wings torn off, for instance, human beings can decide with whom we mate, and so maybe the evolution stops. But there's no real evidence to that, and so we don't really know for sure. But that also brings up that just like there is natural selection, when human beings consciously select what environment or what traits they like in an organism, that's called artificial selection. Artificial selection. Human beings. Why human beings? Yeah, because we can decide. Human beings decide who can mate. Evidence for this is like, maybe you've seen this on, I don't know, like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or something, but I saw one time a picture of what a watermelon looked like in the 1600s, and it was goofy looking and it was tiny. Or we have evidence, like we find in the tombs of Mayan emperors, which I'm kind of making that up. But there's evidence that the Mayans, when they were cultivating corn, it was just this tiny little, almost looked like wheat. I'm trying to draw little seeds here. It was like a stalk with little tiny seeds on it. And then they picked what traits about these plants they liked, and they bred them and bred them and bred them and bred them, only the ones they liked, and eventually they get maize. Like the purple corn, which is still even primitive to the corn we have today. And then people still breed and breed and breed the kind of corn they do like, and that produces new corn, sweet corn that you eat in the can or whatever. Or the watermelon, that little kind of goofy-looking watermelon, we liked the fact that it was sweet-ish, and that we could crack it open, and so we bred those traits: thin rind, sweet inside. And as we kept breeding them, it got bigger and bigger and bigger and sweeter and sweeter and sweeter. And now you really buy more seedless watermelon than you do watermelon. Even in my lifetime, like when I was a kid, we had to spit out the watermelon seeds. And now no one likes that. And so people mostly buy seedless watermelon now. So they make more seedless watermelon. And the seedless watermelons get more and more seedless because of artificial selection. Cow. Who here has ever seen a cow? Who has farmed a cow, Tommy? Who owns cows? That's a question I can ask in Crawford. Who, or their family, you might own something, I don't know, but you're probably at least your family. Whose family owns cows? So you worked with cows. But cow doesn't exist in nature. The organism from which the cow evolved, the aurochs in India, has some rudimentary similarities to the cow that we have today. But you're well aware that there are like Black Angus cows, and there are Hereford cows, and there are Brahman cows, and there are Limousin cows. There are all different kinds of cows because people breed in different traits that they like from other cows. What do we like about cows? Taste good. We like it when they don't eat too much grass, or we like it when they can eat the nasty scrub grass that we can't plant anything else on. We like that they have hooves. We wouldn't want to breed them with human feet that would get poked all the time. We like that they're ruminants so they can ingest grass because we can't use the grass. There's all kinds of things we like about that people in the past liked about the aurochs that they could breed those traits into, and that's called artificial selection. Let me make sure that I haven't missed anything. Do you have questions while I'm looking in this? Your book has a really interesting section on stabilizing or destabilizing selection, which I really enjoy, and that's determining whether the population becomes more different or more the same. Stabilizing selection is when we have kind of two groups that have dissimilar traits, and over time the environment pressures them to becoming more similar. And then destabilizing pressure is when we have kind of one group that is more similar, and the environment over time causes them to have two different traits. And that, eventually, that latter one, destabilizing, can kind of sometimes lead to speciation, where two whole different species occur. Questions, though? So generally, natural selection is the environment selects which traits are passed on to offspring over time. Reproduction is a key part of this, and the passage of time is a key part of this. No questions? Okay.